Now, as you've heard for almost every day every day of this camp, you've heard that our theme is "Be strong and of good courage," and it's a good theme. And as you've heard almost every day for the last 2 weeks, you guys as campers you're in a transformative point in life. I think that word has been mentioned in more than one message. Some of you may be 13, some of you may be 18, but in the next 10 years, you're going to make some of the most important decisions you will make in your entire life. And the goal of us as parents is not well-behaved and good children. That's good, but that's not our goal. And the goal of camp also is to make you a competent, successful, and a righteous adult. If any of you knew me when I was your age, you would have thought I shouldn't be up here, and you would be right. But can you truly be strong and of good courage if you don't know who you are? And you, at this point, are still figuring out your identity. You're figuring out who you are, what are your beliefs, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses. You're developing your decision-making skills. You might start to think differently than your parents. Maybe you have some ideas that conflict with your parents. As long as you're still respectful, that's good. Your parents might sometimes get annoyed with that about you. But it's a good thing, parents. It means they will disagree with you enough that they won't be still 30 and living in your basement. It's good to have arguments. It's good for them to think for themselves, as long as they're respectful. Hopefully you haven't made huge life-altering mistakes yet. But being strong and of good courage takes time. It takes experience. And you're developing your identity as an individual. You're separate from your family. Do any of you use social media? Let's see some hands. Any social media? What do you see about social media? Social media is full of people who would do anything to be famous. And everyone, in a way, seeks to be liked and seeks positive attention from others. That's doing things to be famous isn't necessarily wrong. And we all want to be liked. We all want to be well respected. And we all have different identities. We have different wants, different desires, different needs. We have different skills, like the ladies here. I never in my life do that, not even now. But they got up here on stage and performed different talents. Your life is shaped by the paths you take to fulfill your needs, your goals, and even your wants. I know all of you probably live with a parent or guardian, and they supply your needs. I'm sure if you open the cupboard or open the fridge, you could get something to eat. I think everybody came with clothes. Everybody has access to clean water, probably a house. That means your parents are doing their jobs. But how do you plan to supply your needs? How do you plan to supply your wants when you're outside of your parents' care? You're at the age where you have to start thinking about these things. You can be 30 and still living at your parents' house, but you can't be considered an adult until you're on your own. You're supplying for your own needs. We all want to be self-sufficient. We all seek to supply our major needs and have them met. Food, water, shelter, some clothes. And none of these things are wrong, but it's the way you go about getting them. That's the important thing. And in a broader sense, by that, we all seek wealth. Wealth is just a word for those things. But the true power of wealth is options. True strength in wealth comes from your options. The wealthy of this world, they don't follow the same laws you do. They don't have to. They have options. The wealthy have buildings of attorneys and individuals who lobby or bribe governments to get the things they want done, the laws they want changed. The wealthy have options. And it's safe to say we all seek the strength and the power of wealth, and we all want options. You as teenagers probably don't have very many options. My kids do what they're told because they don't have a choice. I always tell them if they don't like it, they can always go live somewhere else. But what do you have? You have time. Time is on your side. You're young. You're developing. You have an identity. You're all different. You have skills. If you don't have skills, or you keep developing your skills always through your life, keep building on the things you have. You're developing a reputation separate from your family. What you do and how you act identify you. When both David and Samuel were young, in the Bible it talks about their decision making, and it says they grew in stature with both God and men by their good decisions. Their reputation grew. What do others say about you? Is that different from what God might think or say about you? You have fewer options, but you also have fewer responsibilities and obligations right now. You can handle change. As you decide careers, spouses, the life you're going to live, the path you're going to take, most of you, against any odds, you're going to miss more sleep. You're going to make huge geographical changes. You're going to grow more in the next 10 years than you will probably in the rest of your lives. You have sharp minds, but be careful. Your thoughts and your words are powerful. Be careful how you think, how you speak, both about yourself, to yourself, and to others. Your words can alter who you are, and your identity is powerful. Always protect it. Today I'd like to go through a Bible story of Jacob. I think most of you should be familiar with that story. Mr. Fritz went through a little bit of it one night. I'd like to show you that the path you choose must reflect God to truly be strong and courageous. The story of Jacob is a great study for a young person because it follows the path that Jacob's search for identity, for Jacob's search for power and wealth, and how he found the true source of strength and courage, and how it altered his identity. Jacob was no different than you or me. You all know about Jacob's name in Genesis 25. We'll start in Genesis 25. And in verse 24, it says, so when her days were fulfilled to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red, and he was hairy like a garment all over, so they called his name Esau. And afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of his heel, so his name was called Jacob. So that's how Jacob got his name. And of course, when we review the story of Jacob and Esau, I'm going to assume you guys have all read it. We can see that Jacob, early in his life, has an identity problem. He doesn't know who he is. We know Jacob bought Esau's birthright in Genesis 25, verse 29. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary. But Jacob said, sell me your birthright as of this day. And we all know Esau made a decision there. And if we keep going, if we flip to Genesis 27, we can see here, Genesis 27, Mr. Fritz kind of hit on this the other night. And he came near and he kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing, and Isaac blessed him, and he gave him a blessing. But Jacob bought Esau's birthright, Jacob dressed in Esau's clothes. And as you heard the other night, verse 27 and chapter 27, verses 18 and 19. So when he went to his father, he said, "My father," and he said, "Here I am." And Isaac said, "Who are you, my son?" And Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn." So Jacob obviously lied to his dad. He said that he was someone else. So he calls himself Esau. He dressed like Esau. He bought Esau's birthright. And Isaac was deceived by his sense of smell and touch, so Jacob was able to steal Esau's blessing of wealth and power. Let's read that, Genesis 27, verses 27 through 29. "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore may God give you of the dew of heaven, of the fatness of the earth, plenty of grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you." As we read the story, we know Esau was amazing. He was Isaac's favorite. Esau was the benchmark that Jacob compared himself to. He wanted to be Esau. And you know the rest of the story. He of course stole his birthright. He took he lied to his dad and stole his birthright, took what wasn't his. What are Jacob's goals and his priorities right here? What was Jacob focused on? Was it following God? You know, Mr. Fritz, on day 2, he had 2 sets of his siblings come up on the stage, and he had them answer some questions. Do you think if Esau and Jacob came up here, what would their answers be? Did Jacob have Esau's best intentions? Did Esau want the best, or did Jacob want the best for Esau? Do you think Jacob viewed the Lord as his God? I'd like to ask, how old do you think Jacob was? Well, let's read one verse first. Let's go to Genesis 28 and verse 20. We're going to see here. So Jacob's running for his life. He's scared. It says, "Jacob made a vow, saying, 'If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I will come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God.'" Do you think Jacob's priorities were on God? How old do you think Jacob was here? He's running from his brother. Anybody have a guess? How old? 18? That's a good guess. Jacob's running away from home in his 70s. He's 70 years old. People kind of think of him as a con man. He's a little shady, kind of a used car salesman vibe. He's deceived his father, stolen from his brother. He's running scared, and he's afraid of his life. He's 70 years old. Jacob is not the picture of strength and courage. Is Jacob at this point in his life, is he the person who is referenced when God is called the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? I don't think so. But now I want to fast forward. We don't have time to cover the entire story. You should read it on your own. I encourage you to. I want to fast forward 20 years. Let's go to Genesis 32 and verse 6, and we can do that. We can just flip a couple pages and 20 years go by. 32 and verse 6. "Then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, 'We came to your brother Esau, and he's coming to meet you. Him and 400 men are with him.' And it says, so Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed." Probably felt like I did this morning. So Jacob's coming back. We didn't read the other parts of the story for this. It doesn't necessarily matter for right now. But he's coming back with his wives and his children. And he gets word that Esau is heading toward him with 400 men. It's more proof that Esau is amazing. Can any of you guys have smartphones, you got Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, whatever you use. Can you make a phone call? Can you get 400 of your friends to come here in Texas with you? I can't. Esau was cool. And Jacob was still afraid of Esau. And of course, we know he divided up his family, his servants, and his possessions. And Jacob was alone with nothing. And of course, Jacob wrestled with God, and God blessed Jacob. Let's read that. Let's go to Genesis 32 and verse 20. I'm sorry. Genesis 32 and verse 6. And then messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came near to... All right. Genesis 32 and verse 26. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. This is, of course, the being that became Christ. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So God said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And God said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and you have prevailed. Jacob wrestled all night with God, and God blessed him. God gave Jacob a new identity, a new purpose. The first 70 years of Jacob's life were spent focused on his health, his wealth, his power, physical blessings. He wanted the big house, the cool car, cool stuff, whatever it is you want. Jacob wanted those things. But here in Genesis 32, his focus changed, his life changed. Let's go to Genesis 32 and verse 20. Of course, he divided up his family. And verse 20 is an interesting verse. And say, I'm going to read it. And also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. This is what he told his servants and his wives to tell Esau. For he said, I will appease him with a present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face, and perhaps he will accept me. Now in this verse 20, 4 times a Hebrew word for face is used, but the translators only translated it once in verse 20. A better translation for this verse might be, for he thought, I will wipe the anger from his face with a gift that goes before my face. And afterward, when I see his face, perhaps he will lift up my face. And that sounds weird. I would have translated it with one face. But Jacob said it 4 times, and faces were on Jacob's mind after he had wrestled with Christ. What is the significance of face? Your face and your name are the first things that identify you, that define you. Your face is different from everybody else's. Mine is. My name is, we all have different first or last names. Your face, when you look in the mirror, identifies you. It's who you are. And of course, your name tells yourself who you are and tells others who you are. Your blessing, your destiny, what you're called to do, it's all part of your identity. Now, as we know, he met Esau, and Esau's being amazing. He's riding towards Jacob with his buds. And Jacob's actions were kind of strange. Let's look at that. Genesis 33. We'll start in verse 1. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants, and he put maidservants and their children in front of him, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he crossed over the Jordan before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him and wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, "Who are these with you?" So he said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Now if we skip down to verse 8, then Esau said, "What do you mean by this company which I met?" And he said, "These are to find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." And Jacob said, "No, please. If I had found favor in your sight, then receive my present from your hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." So he urged him, and he, being Esau, took it. Now, in those verses, Jacob sent a gift, herds and flocks of animals. He sent wealth. 7 times Jacob bowed himself and his wives and children to Esau. He's showing Esau his power. 7 times Jacob called himself Esau's servant, or he called Esau Lord. And when Esau refused the gift the first time to Jacob, Jacob restated the verse in verse 11. Let's look at it again. In verse 11 here, Jacob says, "Please take my blessing." Jacob was giving back the blessing that he had stolen. He no longer needed or wanted Esau's blessing of wealth and power. He was giving back, it's a symbol. He was bowing down to him, calling him Lord, giving back the wealth and power. Israel was now complete. He now had strength and courage. His identity had changed. His face changed. Jacob looked and compared himself with Esau, but Israel looked and compared himself with God. His name changed. Jacob grasped man. Israel holds on to God. His blessing changed. Jacob's priority was wealth and power. Israel's priority was the word, the truth of God, the will of God. Jacob had a drastic identity shift. Who he wanted to be changed. His name changed. He changed his priorities. And Israel's destiny was revealed. Isaac understood this. The funny thing about all this is Isaac understood that Jacob and Esau had different destinies. And Jacob should have been honest with his father. If we go back, let's look at Genesis 28. I assume God inspired Isaac. When Isaac knew that he was blessing Jacob, he gave a different blessing. When he was deceived and he thought it was Esau, it was a different blessing than this one. Let's look at Genesis 28, verse 1, when Jacob's running away. It says, "Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, 'You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan. Arise and go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father. Take for yourself a wife from there, from the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God the Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may be an assembly of peoples, and give you the blessing of Abraham, to you and your descendants with you, that you may inherit the land in which you are a stranger, to which God gave to Abraham.'" It's a totally different blessing than the one that was meant for Esau. God and Esau understood that both Jacob and Esau's natures were different and their destinies were different. Esau, like this world, his destiny was wealth and power. And it took Jacob 90 years or more to find his identity, to find the true source of strength and power. And then, of course, he walked with God another 57 or so years. You don't have that kind of time. The things that are happening today are happening so fast. You don't live in some desert where you tend sheep and never really see anybody. You guys are interacting with people daily on a level that even when I was a kid never happened. I interacted with a few people that I was around, but I didn't interact with people across social media, across the internet. But your goals, your priorities shape your identity, your focus. Focus on God. When you're focused on God, strength and courage just kind of fall into place. It's not something you think about. All of us have been offered the chance at power. We've all been offered a crown, a new name, a new identity, and eternal power, which we agreed earlier, that's what we're all looking for. When you're God, Mr. Fritz kind of had his example of the cups last night. When you're God, you just have more options. And we're all Jacob's descendants if we spiritually seek his face. Who do you want to be like? What are your priorities? Our destiny, like Israel's, is to seek and hold on to God, the source of all power, strength, and courage. But those are just byproducts of our relationship with God. Don't compromise your identity for fame or wealth. Those things are temporary. You don't have to compromise. Just ask your Father. He already knows what you need.
For more information, go to our website at cogassembly.org. Copyright 2022, Church of God Assembly. All rights reserved.